Well, good. Well, I'm sensing a little bit of a pause in registrants, so I'm feeling as though this might be a good time to get things rolling. I just want to say to everybody on this call, welcome and thank you for taking a few moments to connect with us. Hope this finds you safe and healthy as we all kind of navigate this evolving climate that we're in. So again, thank you and appreciate your time. So we're fortunate to be gathered by the STEM team at Carney Sandoe, and we'll go through some quick introductions just so you can get a sense as to who is on this call. And we'll be providing some information regarding this climate that we're in terms of schools, their hiring, their expectations, and how best to position yourself to land the job that you want. I'll talk about logistics a little bit after this, but first I'd love to go through introductions. We'll start off with Beth.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day so that we can connect about job seeking in this climate. And thanks, Todd, for the kickoff. My name is Beth McArdle, and I'm the Math Associate at Carney Sandoe Associates.
Thanks, Beth. DZ.
I'm DZ. Hello. I am the Physics and STEM Associate here, and I also assist Beth on math. Just one quick response from a question for candidates. Todd might get into this, but one question is, can you see and hear us? Videos are not active for participants, and currently everyone is muted, but at the time when we're asking questions, there isn't an unmute feature. Everything will happen through the question and answer section.
Awesome, thanks DZ. Hi folks, Scott Roy here. I am the Computer Science and Technology Associate and assisted by Denisha Thaxton, so you might get contacted by either of us, but as it relates to STEM, you're looking at the team that would reach out and manage candidates in schools in a multidisciplinary fashion. So that's why there are 4 of us here, and we're also assisted by a few others that are not present.
Great, thank you, Scott. That's great. So yeah, I just want to set the tone for what to expect now. While we have an hour dedicated to this, I don't necessarily see this going longer than 45 minutes, but we never know. See what we get into here. We have activated the Q&A feature, which you can then dive into as questions arise. And ask questions. We'll be monitoring those throughout the time, and feel free to throw those questions up at any time. We will be tackling a few key sections, and of course you can ask questions related to those sections as we progress, but we'll do our best to get to your questions as they come up. But that's how we will be addressing the questions moving forward. This webinar will also be recorded, and it will be sent to you to all registrants later this evening or tomorrow once it's completed. So just an FYI there. Of course, if you have more specific direct questions regarding your own search, feel free to reach out to your associate and contact them directly via phone or email. We're excited to hear from you and want to hear what's going on specifically. But of course, if you have a more general question, this is the platform to ask those. So thank you. Great. Well, once again, thanks for being here, and we'll dive in. I think the first topic we wanted to dive into is just kind of the virtual hiring timeline and kind of what we were hearing and seeing from schools. And if we talk about timeline in general, historically, April, May, and June have been the core hiring months for independent schools. And some would argue that hiring process happens a little bit earlier in the year, maybe starting in March. So here we are at the end of April, about to tackle May, and we are in the throes of the hiring season. But of course, this COVID-19 pandemic has kind of delayed things a little bit. So what we are seeing from hiring schools around the country is a bit of a delay in hiring. Schools are still moving forward with searches, but we're finding that they're falling into 2 camps, if you will. One being schools just moved a little bit more slowly because they wanted to get their distance learning and remote learning kind of situated, make sure their students and faculty are are dialed in and comfortable with the platforms. And now we'll start to engage in the hiring for the fall a little bit more seriously. While there are other schools out there that have put a pause on their hiring and will re-engage maybe later this spring, maybe early June, as they look at their enrollment numbers for the fall and see truly what their needs are going to be for the fall. So as you think about timeline now, know that we are in it right now, but it will be a little bit later this spring and even into the summer months as schools look to make decisions on their hires. So that's what we're seeing timeline wise.
Gotcha. We have a question about if we're talking solely about U.S. schools and if we expect a surge in overseas hiring as well.
It's a very good question. Yeah, most of the data points that I'm sharing at this point are predominantly US based schools. I think as we look at the international market, many of those schools, the international market tends to hire early, right? Hiring in March for international schools is late. So if there were a surge in international positions, we would start to see that a little bit later, now or a little bit later. We haven't seen too much at this point. My assumption is that most of those schools have their faculty set for the coming fall, but in last minute situations, it's so hard to predict. We just don't know, what's going to happen out there. But if the international piece is something that is important to you, be sure to communicate that with the associate that you're working with, and make sure that it's on our radar as we see opportunities out there. In terms of the virtual piece of this, all schools now are hiring virtually. While it's not uncommon for international schools to have a 100% virtual hiring process, this is still new for a lot of schools in the US. But it's where we are, it's the climate that we're in, and schools have adapted pretty well to it. So what we have found, schools are moving along in kind of a 3 to 4 step process, predominantly. Might start with an initial phone interview, see if there's alignment, and then continue to a video interview where you connect with other constituents in the community, other administrators, potentially other members of the science or STEM department, and then move on to another round of video interviewing where you also may be asked to do a demo lesson. And I think the demo lesson is a question that we've received quite a bit when you all registered. And so we will talk about that at a few different stages throughout this webinar this afternoon. But that will be an expectation. And we can talk about kind of the different ways in which that can get set up, because there are a few different angles for that demo lesson. But that's generally what you're going to see in terms of your communication with schools, starting off with an initial phone interview and then continue to a few different video calls with administrators and faculty within the community. And all of that will lead to then an offer and those negotiation conversations at the very end. And that process can take, anywhere from, 2 weeks to 5 weeks. So just be ready for that process.
And Todd, I think it's worth mentioning, as we've seen things change over the past 4 to 6 weeks, independent schools have traditionally had a longer hiring cycle where they're doing their due diligence, and that took a certain number of weeks or even month to 2 months, we'll say, where I think it feels more like summer now already as schools have re-engaged with us and gotten back into hiring. We're seeing the communication expectation be quicker. So I think what we should emphasize here is if there is outreach, plan on it being a quicker back and forth discussion and dialogue to the offer state. Typically in January and February, schools are kicking tires and they're interviewing folks and they're looking at multiple candidates for different searches. And that might take them 2.5 months until the offer state is reached. But we're seeing it be much more condensed these last couple of weeks. And I think that will continue on. And that's typically how it is in the summer, where schools are reaching out quickly to make a last minute hire to fill their roster.
Yeah, really good point, Scott. And so I think that just emphasizes the need, for being in a job search to be communicative and be responsive to those schools that are trying to connect with you and schedule either a phone call or a video call, but to move that process along. It also, I think, lends itself to a school potentially bringing in a few more constituents from campus to connect with you in the interview process, adding maybe another administrator or two, adding another faculty member or two to get that connection with you and see if there's a really good fit. And schools are always looking for buy-in and for agreement on hires. And so I think that's something to expect as you move along in the video interviewing process.
We had a question from Peter about expecting delays. If schools have to continue their closures into 2021, should we expect further delays? I think schools aren't necessarily closing, they're going to online learning. And so there will be teachers who need to fill those slots. A lot of the exact timing of when things are going to open up, that's just something beyond us completely. And we're going to have to just kind of be adaptable with that and roll and see how that kind of unfolds for all schools. And we work with schools around the globe. So, some schools in China are already reopening, and versus here, which we're still closed. So it's really a question mark in terms of that. And how that will unfold. But, schools will always need teachers. I don't think that there's ever going to be a point where they're totally closed. They're going to be this online version. So teachers will always have to be behind the camera or somewhere to kind of facilitate those classes. So something to keep in mind.
I think that's a good point, DZ, that we've had folks come to us, at least I have, in computer science and technology can be one of the more remote capable or the remote work ability of technology areas. Most industries can do something like that. Schools have traditionally not. We have not had remote positions, or at least I haven't, maybe one or two in a decade. I think we may see that change as we move into next school year. And I think schools will preemptively look to hire some folks that are able to make that switch quickly. And everyone, as a case study in the past month, has pivoted to online or blended some sort of remote instruction. And so we realize, and schools realize, this is a work in progress. That's something that you can use to your advantage. Take the crisis, what you've learned, if you have had to pivot to home instruction as a teacher, and emphasize the things that you've learned along the way, because that may be still in play in September. I don't think it will, but we don't know. I mean, that's something that as the summer, as we get into the summer, I think it'll be more clear to us.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Scott. And I think all schools want to welcome kids in the fall, right? They want to be able to open up their doors and dive right in. So I think every school's preparing for that, but also understanding that, there has to be a plan B in place, depending on the demands by the states. So great. Before next session is going to be led by Beth on school expectations, but before we go there, was curious if there's any specific questions regarding timeline or the virtual hiring process.
One question was about likelihood of being open in the fall. And again, that's just something that isn't really within our purview to know the exact numbers or statistical likelihood. It depends on how, this all plays out health-wise nationally. So.
Yeah, I think my impression is schools are hiring right now for the fall to be on campus. And I think that's that's what we should operate under until there's other information.
Exactly right. Great.
Another question came in about virtual hiring. Are there buzzwords schools are looking for now virtually and in the new situation in hand? And also a comment that, so we'll start with there. Let's go with that one.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is candidates sharing that they have a certain dexterity with online platforms. How are you doing your classroom management? What learning management system are you using? What software packages? I know that those things are peripheral to the actual instruction, but they are sort of the scaffolding that's allowing you to do it remotely. So I think showing that you have some experience, regardless of how limited, shows that at least you're aware and you're pivoting to the remote instruction. I think that why not sell that as a skill that you've gained.
Great. Okay.
Great.
I think that's everything in terms of timeline.
Yeah.
we have a question coming up about preparing for interviews, but that's going to be talked about. And I guess this one is in timeline, and if you positions were submitted at one point and you haven't heard
Yeah.
for, you know, that's really, every school's at a different place in their hiring. So it really doesn't exactly, it doesn't mean it's not a no as you're asking in the question. It's just a question mark of where the school is in their hiring. But I think that is everything for this topic.
Great. Excellent. Beth.
Yeah, it's a good segue for me because I'm going to be talking about schools' expectations. And so the question about following up on a referral that you had earlier in the season before the pandemic came about, kind of what are the next steps now? And we also received a lot of questions in advance of the webinar about what can you do to stand out and be proactive. And I think my colleagues would agree that if there is a job opening that is still open on your Candidate Connect account or a new job that's presented to you, you should not feel hesitant about following up with that hiring contact or using the follow-up guidelines in Candidate Connect. You can be proactive as a job seeker. Now, of course, your messaging should be mindful that that timing may be the hiring timeline may be delayed, or the hiring contact may not be as responsive as you would have hoped because of our busy schedules now. But it shouldn't prevent you from being proactive. And certainly if schools are reaching back out to you or reaching out to you about your candidacy, we always ask whether there's, you know, at any time that you be responsive, even if it's a no, even if it's, I'm not interested in this school at this time, or my search is in another direction. I think in communication now, everybody's mindful of everybody's personal situations, but the professional job-seeking communication can still move forward. And so we do encourage you to follow up on your referrals as you would and be responsive to school hiring contacts. So that's kind of on the early stage. So if you do that first step of a phone or Skype or Zoom interview with the first hiring contact, usually it's the dean of faculty or the STEM chair or somebody or dean of students, and you're moving through the hiring process of what would be a virtual interview process. So we talked a little bit about what that could look like. But you may, like Todd mentioned, you may have access to interview with a lot of folks at the school, which is going to be really important now because you won't necessarily have the ability to visit the campus. So I think our recommendations there are be mindful that it might not be one virtual day. If it is one virtual hiring day that the school is scheduled for you, make sure you're prepared, make sure there are breaks in that schedule, because you know, you might not be able to be your best self if you're sitting through a laptop and it's exhausting and tiring for 8 hours, and we've heard that from some candidates. So just make sure everybody's clear about what the virtual hiring is going to look like and who you're speaking with, who's the slate of people that you're speaking with. And you can have different questions for those individuals and be prepared to talk to those individuals on either a series of days or the one virtual hiring day. So I mentioned briefly, and I think my colleagues can speak to this too, that the main difference now is you're not going to be able to go to campus. So what does that mean about the types of questions you're going to be asking? And I think the questions you need to be asking is really getting to learn about the school's culture and having each person that you're talking to information share about what it's like to be on campus and what is the culture of the school. Now you can do your own research. You can ask for them to give virtual tours. So the admissions department or maybe the schools themselves have now developed virtual tours so you can actually see the campus. But definitely ask about what it feels like to be on campus, because you probably won't get to that point through this virtual hiring process. But I think preparation is key. Know your audience. Your questions might be different for different people. And in terms of the demonstration lesson, and I think Todd mentioned and DZ mentioned, it can take various forms. You may do a demonstration lesson to that school's student body, to a group of that school's students. And that's going to be its own element. It probably won't be an hour. It probably will be half hour or under, but make sure you know if the demonstration lesson is going to be live to their students, if it's going to be live to the maybe members of the adult community there where you would be prepared, or one of the things on our virtual resources page is they might have a demonstration lesson for you to critique so that you can see someone else's lesson and see what you would say about it. So there are varying ways that schools are tackling this demonstration lesson virtually. And I think the best thing to do is just make sure you have all of your questions answered about what that content's going to look like. Are you expected to come up with your own unit and content, or are they going to tell you what the content's going to be for you to demonstrate? So all of those questions would happen if you had to go on campus, but it's especially important now that it's virtual.
Beth, we have 2 questions kind of along this. One person asked, I have access to the person who is in the role I'm applying for. Are there specific questions that I should ask that person? And the second one is, after I submit my materials, how long should I wait before I follow up if I don't hear back from them?
Those are 2 different questions. I'll tackle the second one first. I think if you followed up, you've made outreach, you've sent your initial cover letter or completed an online application or connected with the school once, and you haven't heard back, I think the first question that was addressing this is it definitely a no? No, it's not definitely a no. It could just be that they're still in process of gathering candidate information. I would recommend, and I leave this to my colleagues, I would say 1 to 2 weeks later, you can follow up and say, I wanted to express continued interest. I hope you received my initial outreach.
I usually wait 2 weeks, you know, because there's different things going on at the school, but yeah, right in that window for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Okay, great. And the other question was about access to the person that that you might be replacing. Well, you know, it's a good question. You ask their perspective, you know, some good, so that's just good interviewing questions, which would be, what are some of the challenges that you're facing or that you faced that you've overcome, and what strategies did you use with the rest of the faculty to overcome them? And our website and our virtual resources tab has a lot of blog posts about what questions should I ask my interviewers, but particularly for the person that you're replacing, you know, ask them to be candid with you about their situation.
Yeah, and that's a unique situation because that doesn't really happen all that often. So I think if you have that opportunity to have that conversation, I think Beth's right. You want to ask kind of those inquisitive questions just to understand about the community, the expectations of the role, expectations within the school, and gather that perspective, and then be able to balance that out. But it's a unique position to be able to speak with a person who is leaving the position that you were actually interviewing for.
And I think along those lines, one thing that you might ask is, you know, you've been in this role a while. What question do you wish you had asked the person who had the role beforehand that you didn't think to ask? You know, because there's always things that you don't think about asking, right? And who better to answer that than the person in the seat right now? So just asking, you know, what would you have wished you asked before you started, and how would you answer it? It'll kind of get you what you're, because like Todd said, and everyone's saying, that's a really unique position. Not everyone gets that opportunity. So what a treat, but also it's important to handle it professionally and with care, because you don't want to make the person feel uncomfortable. So just keeping that balance.
Yeah, that level of professionalism is essential. And it's just to jump in with Beth on her topic of demo lessons, you're right, it can take a variety of forms. And I think one piece that all schools will try to do is a debrief with you after the lesson. And I think that is where schools are really going to dive in and ask you questions. Well, how did it go? You know, what could you have done better? And they want to hear your thinking. You know, they want to hear kind of what you wish you should have, what you wish you did. They want to hear kind of how you're critiquing yourself, because they're always looking for those teachers who are looking to better themselves and find the best ways to really connect and build those relationships with the students and make sure that it's truly an engaging interaction. So that's something to be prepared for too, is that post-demo lesson debrief. Great. Anything else? Looks like DZ, you're muted right now, so I don't know if you're trying. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm typing some responses that are kind of one-off, so I'm trying to mute myself. So that's it in terms of questions regarding kind of timeline and virtual interviews. Wait a minute, one just popped in. I recently had an interview and they seemed interested and said they'll be in touch, but I do know they shared how hectic it's been. Should I reach back out?
Yeah,
and I
great.
would say that, yeah, again, back to that kind of giving the school some time because they're interviewing other folks, and you're right, things are hectic right now. So giving them some breathing room, but it also depends what stage of the game are you at. You had an interview, was it that first initial interview? Because they could be interviewing a good number of folks. Was it the virtual demo lesson? And in either case, I would give at least a week to 2 weeks before, reaching out. The schools are busy and things are always pivoting for them right now. There's the live wires coming at all the time.
That's
so,
right.
And they don't know what to expect either. So it's one of our core concepts at Carney Sandoe is expect change and adapt. And this is one of those times that adaptability is mission critical in the interview process and patience as well. So.
And I think just in general, I think STEM lends itself to being the utility player of faculty, right? Because it crosses multiple disciplines. You get exposed to a lot more than just a pure AP track teacher, subject area expert in one specific important subject area. The STEM discipline, you get to sit in between all of those. And I think that's where having flexibility and being amenable is going to be an asset. And that's what schools are looking for. So anything that you can share that will underscore that is going to be attractive to schools.
Excellent. Great. Beth, any other pieces you wanted to throw out there before we transition?
No, I think this is a good time to transition to being able to virtually interview with schools at our hiring event this weekend.
Yeah, so we have a virtual hiring forum, which is exciting. We, as our second, but definitely our largest so far, and it will be happening this Friday and Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern time. Now we're extending the hours a little bit because we know there are folks on the West Coast and who need to interview. So we're trying to extend the hours on Friday and Saturday for that purpose. You would register for that right on Candidate Connect. You can do that. You can email your associate or your team here at Carney Sandoe, and we'd be happy to help you with that. And what will happen is we'll get you registered and you'll get access to, for those of you who haven't been to one of our hiring conferences before, we have a separate website and kind of home base for you during that time. And it's called the conference module. And you'll get access to that. You'll get the green light email from our colleague Kim, who's going to give you access to that. And you'll be able to see the schools that are interviewing, the positions that they're interviewing for, or at least the public ones. And then you'll also be able to see right next to the school name their preferred method of interviewing, whether it's Zoom, Skype, Teams, phone, whatever it might be. And so in preparation for those of you who are able to do it, and you can set your schedule, that's important to know too. You don't have to come from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. both days. In fact, we would recommend you eat, so you don't do that. So you can set your schedule exactly the way that you want, and you can mark off times. Be mindful that the times that you see on the conference module are all in EST. They will not adjust to your time zone. So please make sure that when you set a lunchtime, it is appropriate to you. You'll be able to do that. And that's one thing to start preparing if you're able to join us. And other things that you can do is go to Candidate Connect right now. Make sure that your geographic preferences are updated. Have those edited or changed since you've joined. Make sure that your materials are up to date. Some of you have joined a while ago and a 2018 resume is still on record with us. And so getting those materials updated is a really great, not only just for the virtual forum, but also just in good job hunting practices. If you're at the forum, schools can search based on the geographic parameters that you put into Candidate Connect. So making sure those are accurate is really an important part of things. Schools will be in charge of setting up the interviews. And like I mentioned, they'll say exactly their preferred method of communication. One thing you could also do now is if you don't have Zoom or Skype, set up accounts. You know, that's something that you can really do to kind of prepare yourself and get comfortable with them now, so that when you're doing it, it's not your first time doing it with a school, right? Find a friend. There's plenty of them out there. A lot of us have Zoom now that didn't before. So just doing a practice call, getting familiar with kind of the user interface of that, that's really important. The schools will set up the interviews. They're about 25 to 30 minutes. The school will do a lot of the interviewing, but it's important to prepare for those. You know, sit down, have a couple of notes about each school, and just know what you want to, what you're intrigued about, and what draws you to that school. You know, as much as you're looking for the right school, they're looking for the right person. And if you have to interview them and make sure it's a right fit on both parts. You know, if you do register, you're going to get access to the conference module. There's a frequently asked questions page there. So you'll get a lot of questions that I might not answer here. I'll go back to the question and answer and take a look at the folks. I see the people are asking questions, so I'm excited to look there in a second. But we'll answer them. And if they're not there, the frequently asked questions page is a great place. New schools are registering every day. You know, new positions are being added every day. So you can reach out to the schools via the messaging platform. But it's just a great opportunity to meet with a lot of schools at one time. Set aside some time that you can meet. And I think that is kind of the general overview. Anyone else on the team have things to add that I might have missed?
Did you mention anything about the position list there?
So you can see there is a listing of positions that you'll be able to see the positions that they list, the public ones, and you can follow up with the school in the messaging feature there. Yeah, so it's the schools that you'll be able to see, the folks who are interviewing for the school, and the positions list. Beth?
Yeah, DZ, from the questions addressing the conference, one of them was about, is this for school starting in August? Yes, these are the interviewing at this event will be for positions to start when school starts, hopefully in August and the fall, for the fall term. So they are for fall 2020. Those are what positions the schools are going to be interviewing for. And there was another question about how to book interviews, and schools essentially book the interviews with candidates, but there is a way where candidates registered for the event can make outreach to the school hiring contacts that are registered for the event.
A few more questions. Can you change your availability after confirming you're available in the module? Absolutely. You can change it the day of. You know, it is a live feature. Helpful if you change the ones moving forward and not previous time slots. But yeah, you can, if you suddenly have to, you know, run out or something happens, yeah, absolutely. You can adjust live. Another question was about if my preference is geographically limited to one city, is there a way to filter? You'll be able to see the schools and where they're located. Mind you, we won't have this will be most beneficial for folks who are geographically flexible, because that will give you the broadest range of schools. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't reach out to the schools if there's only one or two in the city in which you're looking. Feel free to reach out to them and say, you know, I'm here, I'm actively moving there. And that's actually a real big draw right now. That was horrible grammar, but it's a really important thing for schools to know that you're geographically targeting their area, because they have some efficiency things that they need to focus on right now, and knowing that a candidate is really intrigued in their specific city is going to be attractive to them. So mentioning that to them is really important.
DZ, if I can just jump in with,
sure, please.
with a quick thought. You know, I think the goal of these conversations that you're having with schools, you know, through this virtual event will be for the school to want to continue the conversation. So in terms of the next steps after the virtual event, you're hoping for another, you know, video call or another phone call to connect with other folks on campus. So these conversations are truly introductory, getting to know one another, seeing if there's alignment, seeing if there could be a really good fit and match in terms of your style and approach as a teacher and what the school's looking for, et cetera. So it's just a great way to have that first conversation through that video platform, and be able to kind of launch the interview process from there.
A few more questions. In terms of, are you able to see the school and position list before registering for the conference? Well, if you're interested in a specific school, we can let you know if they're attending, but the whole list is available once you do register. And in terms of sending a message and setting up the interview, yes, we do recommend that you email all of the schools that you are interested in, and just let them know about why you're interested in their school, and let them know if you're looking specifically in that geographic region as well. It doesn't mean, you know, not every school follows up on every message. So as if anyone was at the webinar with John Faubert and Denisha Thaxton yesterday, I think his exact words were, don't be overly hopeful that you're going to get a response, you know, be optimistic, but there's a chance that you won't get. Again, there's so much on schools' plates right now that messaging feature isn't always the top priority in making sure and what's going to happen there. You will know your interview schedule because when you log into your module, you'll have access to your schedule and you can see ahead of time. Schools do schedule conferences and interviews the day of, so it's not finalized necessarily. So just be mindful that you should always keep an eye on your email and the conference module.
I think just to follow up with that, DZ, one thing to keep in mind is schools use our system differently. And so while this is anchored to Friday and Saturday of this week, there's still access and this will be live for a number of weeks after. If you walk away without any interviews, I think that doesn't mean that there wasn't opportunity there or there isn't going to be interviews. Schools will continue to use it and may reach out after. So if you send a message and there isn't a reply, it might be that the school was busy for whatever reason. They couldn't get back to all of the correspondence that they were receiving before or during the event. So things do happen in the weeks after.
And I guess one last question before kind of moving on. In terms of having interviews, Corey's asking, would you recommend interviewing with schools you're not interested in due to location in terms of getting experience for interviewing? You know, while that is important to get the experience, and we encourage you to take every interview, you know, if you think there's a chance you are going to move to that place. But if you're geographically tied to Atlanta and the school's in Los Angeles, that school could be interviewing another candidate who's eager to move to Los Angeles. So you want to be respectful of the school and the other candidates involved. So if you know for certain you will be unable to do that, I would say it's okay to decline. And you also be mindful that it's okay to take a phone interview as well, because it's nice to know about other schools and when that school might be at a school, that contact might be at a school in Atlanta next year. So it's always good to kind of build your professional network. But we always recommend, you know, taking an interview if you think there's even a chance, because you never know when a phone call is free, and you never know when that school is going to charm you with and kind of what's going on, and the really incredible programs that might be a complete draw for you and you'd never expect it. One of my friends took a job and was looking to move anywhere in the country except for one place, and is now in that one place in his 5th year of working there because he had a phone call with the school and they charmed him, and there he is. So you never know when a phone call is gonna really change your mind. So we recommend taking every interview that you can, as long as you're being respectful to the school and other candidates.
Great. DZ, excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we're ready to move on, and just conscious of time here, so trying to keep things moving along. So Scott.
Yeah, sure. So we're going to talk a little bit right now about how can you stand out? What things can you do to your profile and your materials to make you more attractive to schools for the positions you're seeking? And I think we built over the last half dozen years some things that we like to think make your materials more colorful, that help tell your story, and more than just what you've done that a resume shows. So as you log into Canada Connect and you look at your profile, we've added 5 questions that are meant to be subjective in your voice, short answer questions that the schools see. And so we find it very helpful, and we advise all candidates to take some time and complete those. We see them, and it makes us more informed as we do a deep dive into your candidacy and what your priorities in your job search are. It helps us understand what makes you unique. And so as we're advocating for you, that fills in the blanks and helps round out, I think, a more colorful profile in addition to what you've done. So under the profile tab, there are those 5 questions, and it's things that, you know, what makes you successful, or what have you learned the most in your current position? What adjectives do you just use to describe yourself? Or, you know, what makes you distinct as an educator? Things like that are, in addition to where you went to school and where you're working, will really embellish your profile as schools are reviewing candidates. So that's a good start. There are other sections like technologies, instructional experiences, that if you really comb through, you can add things like Harkness method and things around project-based learning. So these are skills that schools are asking us to highlight on a candidate's resume or candidate's profile. And we do as much as we can if in conversation they come up. But if you go through those sections and make sure you haven't missed anything, or as you pick up new skills, if you highlight that, I think that's going to go a long way, because those are the skills in this day and age that we're being asked, especially in the STEM areas. Anything that's student-centric. I think STEM is, in essence, led the way to curriculum remapping or curriculum, as the curriculum has evolved and become more student-centric around design thinking and project-based learning. STEM has sort of led the way or been practitioners of that. So we like to highlight that. And that's a question we get asked a lot. Outside of the hard skills that you might have, these are soft skills or methods that I think you should be highlighting on your candidate profiles. So curriculum experience is a big one, those 5 subjective questions. I think it's important to things that now that we're in a crisis and that you've picked up along the way in terms of technologies supporting the classroom, talking about those and sharing this with your associate, because that's really how we can bring value to the table for you. And as we know what you've been through and what you have picked up as skills, we can, we write a profile comment for you, and we're going to do that and sell that to the school. Let me see. So there's another section that I think is often overlooked, and it goes along with folks asking about online demos or online portfolio, we'll say. So we have a section in the documents area of your profile that allows you to upload links. So if you've done any curriculum work or you have an online portfolio and you want to add that as a link, you can very easily do that. And that's going to show up to the school. It shows up to us and to the school. And so if it's a video of you teaching or giving a lecture, whatever it might be, that is going to augment your profile and resume, we suggest highly that you add those in there. You can put teaching examples. Some folks have put their certifications. If they have technology related skills, they might upload something that is a credential of sort. Those are important. I think if you have any extracurricular activities, things like coaching, clubs, any sort of work with volunteer, we like to know that. And those are things that we highlight to the school anytime we're advocating for you. Let me see, did I miss anything? I think those were the big areas. Yep, that's I think so. Keeping your profile up to date and keeping your placement associate in the loop. Those are the main important take homes.
That's great, Scott. Yeah, thank you. One piece that I also am thinking about in terms of the skill set is, not just what is going to be happening in the classroom, but also schools are so curious as to what you can contribute to the community outside of the classroom. And that can be a STEM club, a robotics club. It could be, coding. It could be coaching soccer, baseball, helping with an arts program, whatever it is. Schools are looking for those educators who have the ability to build those relationships, make those connections with the students, both in and out of the classroom. So thinking about other ways in which you can really contribute to the students' interests and passions is something that schools are always looking for. And they want that, expert skill set academically, but also what else can you bring that's going to add value, not just to the community, but really for our students. And that's something that schools are always looking for.
I think a good example of that I've seen over the years is candidates that are career changers coming into STEM maybe have a more open doorway because they can bring with them relationships or skills that schools will want to leverage. So an example might be grant writing. You might be a postdoc or might have done some research or worked in a lab or with an engineering firm where you were doing this type of work. Or you might be doing some sort of project work as a designer, engineer, mathematician, whatever it might be, where you have established relationships with community businesses, engineering firms that could really be an extension of the curriculum that we're seeing in the classroom. And so there can be field trips or guest speakers that come in that help complement whatever instruction is occurring. And that works really well with STEM, and for career changers can be something that is marketable.
Yeah, really good point. Yeah, and we're definitely seeing schools bring on science research programs a little bit more significantly. So having that interest and leading a research program, collaborating with other faculty and getting some good hands-on, STEM and science research work is something that schools see a lot of value in.
We have a couple of questions popping up on the Q&A thread. The first is a follow-up from Corey. Do you mean grant writing to support extracurriculars? Is that what you were speaking about?
I think I meant just generically. I think we've seen, as we worked on some STEM positions, there were feedback from schools that were looking for someone who had scientific, maybe working with NSF or NOAA. There were schools in Florida that do some stuff with environmental sampling. And so they were writing grants to get funding for specific measurement apparatus. And the Ransom Everglades, for instance, is doing a big project where they're measuring salinity and turbidity of the estuary out in the bay. And rather than the school have to absorb the acquisition cost of whatever assets, and some of these things are, Bluetooth measurement devices that connect wirelessly, or some measurement equipment like that. They needed someone who could write a grant that NOAA would say, we're going to greenlight the money, here's the funding, and then so the school wins because they're not buying the equipment, and their students are participating in a research project that is graduate level.
Another question from Drew. Would you suggest we put videos that is us physically teaching, for example, ourselves in front of a camera, or maybe using technology teaching and explaining everything in other apps? So what was your recommendation there?
I think both of those examples are excellent. We've seen some really produced videos. It's tough because you want to have it be authentic, and we understand, everybody has a camera on their phone, and that can suffice if you feel comfortable with it and it showcases your personality and what you're capable of, then great. If you have the skills to edit it down and make it more showcased, that's always great too. And that might even, that might demonstrate a skill in media that is a part of STEM. So I think both those examples are great for uploading into your profile.
Yeah, Scott, especially in this climate, anything that you can promote your candidacy, your personality, your expertise, whether it's, and we've always at Carney Sandoe have asked for kind of a dossier of materials, but now anything on a multimedia, any videos, any online websites that you have, anything that you have that can really present to the school to learn about you and your educational philosophy and your connection with students, including online videos of yourself teaching, is going to go a long way. And I think schools are even now asking candidates to provide that as part of the interviewing process. So I think if you have them, include them in your Carney Sandoe dossier, but also have them at the ready for when schools ask if you have a video or not. If you have one and it's really good, offer to present it to them. You know, be proactive about saying, would you like to see my online video? And I'm sure they would welcome it.
I think one other thing I wanted to mention too is another reason why it's important to upload these types of dynamic content to your profile on Carney Sandoe is that there is a little bit of Zoom fatigue that's starting to set in. I can say that in the last 5 weeks, I've done more video conferencing than I've done in the last 10 years. And so schools are now looking to do anything they can do offline to get a sense of your candidacy before investing in the Zoom. They want to do that ahead of time. So yeah, I think if you have it, you have the time and you can review your profile on Carney Sandoe and update that and let us know. That's going to benefit you as schools are going through the steps of the interview process.
A question from Talia. In the profile section of Candidate Connect, what category do you suggest we list engineering courses under, as there isn't another section within math and science? Physics is also often paired with engineering, so that is one place where you could articulate that. Or also just communicating in an email to your team at CS&A is another great way to make them know kind of that expertise that you have. Another question I'll throw out to the team. Do you have experience with what schools are looking for in terms of remote STEM labs specifically?
Yeah, I saw a couple of questions like that come in before the event. I think doing remote STEM is difficult unless you've got a lab or the equipment set up. So I think that's a work in progress. I think what we'll see is maybe smaller, lighter projects. As we were talking yesterday, how do you measure velocity in measurements? If you don't have the equipment to do that, you can't set that up. It's hard to do the remote. Some of the areas in STEM don't lend themselves as easily as maybe the abstract sciences. So computer science, the theoretical physics and math, I think are easier to do remotely than it is to do sampling, some of the electronics and environmental sampling. You have to set up the lab. So I think that's a work in progress, and maybe as the summer nears, we'll see more demand for that, or we might get more clarity around it. But I think it's hard for me to answer that one.
And in terms of highlighting our skills to schools, what is the best way to present experience in small business and as an adjunct professor to potential independent schools? How do I best highlight that?
Well, business relationships can work as an advantage for STEM. It can be the connections that bring firms to the classroom, engineers or graphic designers, whatever it might be that fits into the curriculum. And so I think finding the connection between what you were doing and what the classroom needs is going to be important. So that's the business side of it. The second half was, what did you say, TZ?
It was about, I've actually dismissed the question right now, but it was about adjunct professor and small business.
Yes.
That's what it was. Adjunct professor and small businesses. How do we best translate that to schools?
Well, I think actually this ties into one of the next questions, which what is the advice for first-time teachers applying to schools, and also the transition from whether you're making a transition from collegiate teaching or you're a new educator. The main thing that independent schools are looking for at the secondary level is subject matter expertise, your connection with kids in some capacity. So if you're a first-year teacher, all of the things that you did at summer camp and summer jobs and working with kids in different capacities, you're going to want to highlight. And then on the other side, as an associate professor, in what capacities have you worked with secondary students? So I think those are the things that you can do, or that the independent schools are looking for, is a commitment to working with students at the secondary level. And I was going to say a good place to talk about those things might be in your personal statement and your educational philosophy statement, to talk about the ways in which you've connected with kids.
Yeah, good point, Beth. And I just want to emphasize that piece. I think the connectivity, the engagement, anything you've done, working with children and emphasizing that with schools is going to be essential. As much as schools love to see the master's degree, the PhD, and the subject matter, because it really shows an expertise in your field, they also want to make sure that you're passionate about working with teenagers every day, or middle school students, every day. That's something that schools are going to come to when they go through that interview process. Does this person really have a passion and interest and desire to be working with kids day in and day out?
And one of the things that schools are always being mindful of is making sure that their faculty represents their student body. So they want to have teachers who can connect with all their students. And so that means having veteran teachers, and that means having folks fresh out of college, who can really appeal to the range of learners and backgrounds that are present at the school. Every teacher brings something at every stage of their life. So just be confident in what you bring in terms of your ability to connect with schools, your subject matter expertise. You're going to be up to date on kind of the newest topics, right? Someone who's been out of school 10 years might not be reading what you've just read. What a great thing to have a conversation between the two of those teachers and have that shown to students. So just being mindful that every teacher has a place at a school, and they're looking for all folks. Along those lines, Talia just asked, I had an interview where they asked for a demo lesson on anything. What topics do you suggest we pick, and how specific should we be? For example, if we do a lesson on fraction, should it be teaching, addition, subtraction, etc.? My advice there, and I don't know what others would say, is if they're telling you to teach on anything, don't be overwhelmed. You could talk about asparagus if you wanted to, right? It's really just your ability most likely in that situation, they're looking for your ability to communicate and your ability to connect with an audience. And so truly, it could talk about tennis balls if you wanted to. You'd want to have some learning in there, of course, but you could talk about circumference and area and velocity and bouncing. And tennis ball has a lot of math in it, right? So at that point, just be, they're looking for your ability to communicate, your ability to know the subject area, and your ability to kind of be adaptable, right? Beth?
This would also be a case where, let's say it should be something that you feel like is your strength, first of all, pick something you know really well. But you might also have 3 or 4 topics, and there's no problem for you to really engage in a discussion with the hiring contact to say, I'm thinking about these 4 things, which one would you recommend, right? So especially in this time where communication is so important with the school hiring contacts about what this process is going to look like and what the expectations are, feel free to ask. And you can say, here are the 3 topics I think about, what would you recommend? And then they want you to be successful too. So they're gonna try to help you through the process to make it a successful experience. So that would be my recommendation on that.
Excellent. Well, good. Well, looking as though we're about 57 minutes into this. I think we're in the final moments here, but don't want to cut things off too quickly. So would love to just continue the question and answer for another minute or so, and then I think we might wrap things up. So if there are other questions that have come up or that you have that are more general, well, this is the time to ask those, and we can tackle that.
Question from Thomas. In the timeline topic of the webinar, I thought I heard Beth mention CS&A's follow-up procedure guide. Where can we find that, and can it connect if it exists? Also, do you have any recommendation on how to follow up with schools who have an employment portal where there's no specific contact person?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of the second half of that question, in terms of the employment portal, that is becoming more of a common theme that we're seeing in schools, and it's just a due process that schools are requiring. So if there is a follow-up there for you to do after you completed the initial application, it's just whatever their generic employment @ email may be. There is somebody on the other side, either someone in an HR team or someone on the senior admin team who is monitoring that account. So that's just the best process. Schools have determined that that's how they want to move forward in their hiring process. So you just have to honor that.
Yeah, and the first part of the question was when you receive a referral, and you can talk to your associate about your referrals, it does say kind of follow-up guidelines or how to follow up. In most cases, it's sending a cover letter or completing an online application, or it might say do not follow up. But in the referral itself, it will, if you click into it, it will have the steps to follow up.
I think in all these instances, keep your placement associate informed. So we make notes of that, and we're going to advocate on your behalf. And so if schools give us feedback in different ways and at different times. And so the more we're in the loop of what you're doing and what you're thinking, the more we can campaign for you.
A question came in, will the recording of this webinar be posted anywhere? We will be sending that out. It is being recorded, and we'll be able to send out that link to everyone here. Another question about referrals. Can we clean up our referrals and delete unwanted and filled positions? In terms of the filled positions, you'll note when schools we'll put a word hold or closed before it, just so you know that things are kind of wrapping up. And you'll probably see that as well as it's kind of winding down. And so it'll disappear from your list of active referrals once it is permanently and definitively closed. So that will erase. In terms of unwanted referrals, that isn't something necessarily that we do delete. You'd be surprised how many times people decline or say they're not interested in a position and then end up a month later following up and taking the job. So it's something we'll leave there until it's definitively closed, and you can just brush past it if you aren't interested in that. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that.
Yeah,
I don't
perfect.
think so.
And I think the last question, unless anyone has anything else, if I don't see a position relevant to me in the position list for the conference module, is it still worth me sending them a message to make sure they don't have any other open positions?
Yes, a lot of times at the conferences, we'll see schools interviewing candidates when they don't have an open position. So they might be doing that preemptively, or they might be doing that and they just haven't gotten around procedurally to list it formally with us. And we can often tell that when we see a lot of computer science. I would see computer science listed on a school schedule, no position. I know that that's impetus for me to follow up with the school because likely they have an opening. So absolutely reach out, and if the school has interest, they'll get back to you.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think particularly if it's in a location where you're committed to being, I think schools are always interested in learning about quality educators who are in their neck of the woods, because that could spur a unique conversation. So absolutely. Good. Well,
and for those who have questions that are unanswered, I know that we didn't get to every single one of them. Just time is a constraint. Feel free to reach out to your placement associate. We are happy to help any way that we can. We could set up a phone call if need be if we haven't done that. And we're really here to answer any questions. We know it's uncertain times and we're in touch with schools a lot more. So we're here to just kind of guide you however we can and be a resource and answer anything kind of in these extraordinary times that we're right now. So, and again, the link will be coming out. I believe it will be from someone named Julie Landis, who's been coordinating this and just had pop off. So
excellent. Thanks,
Awesome.
DZ.
Thanks, DZ. Thanks for moderating.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for looking at that. Anyone else have any other words of wisdom to share before we sign off here?
I have one small nugget. I tend to find myself sharing a lot with candidates about positions or referrals that they might be interested in. And I think that's not to get caught up in the job description or the title. If the position is at a school that you like or are interested in, or an area that you're interested in, these things can be flexible. So we've seen the hiring picture change midstream. I would not rule yourself out by declining a job or a potential interview or referral because you think it's not exactly what you want. A lot of the pieces are flexible. STEM is by nature, as I think I said, a utility position. So keep that in mind when you're looking at which referrals you might be interested in. And I say go for it and at least have a conversation. And keep your placement associate informed of all things regarding your job search. It's remarkable how many people don't keep us in the loop. And then we find out where we could have added value or could have given you advice beforehand or feedback after. We like to be in the know so that we can represent you as best we can.
Yeah, really good point, Scott. Yeah, use us, all of us, as a resource for you. That's why we're here. So please reach out, let us know. And schools really look for someone who's going to be the right fit, right? The right person for their community. And that's something that all schools are emphasizing as they look to make a hire. The last piece, Scott, I assume that you're wrapped up with your point. The one last piece I just wanted to say, and I kind of say this to everybody who's diving into a job search, is as you go through the process and are connecting with schools, be positive, be professional, be prepared. And I think if you do those three things well, that positions you beautifully to land the job that you want, right? Schools want to talk to someone who is showing enthusiasm. They want to talk to somebody who is being professional in the process and who is doing their due diligence, asking questions, and showing that they're truly prepared for the opportunity at hand. So that's my kind of my ending right there.
Can I tack on to the ending, because I have two more P's that are
continue the P's
that are usually my P's, which is the hardest thing for job seekers. And we know that job seeking is stressful at any time, but especially now when there's so much uncertainty with schools, and the schools are uncertain about all the questions that we've addressed today. But patience and persistence at the same time is like really hard and impossible, but also required for job seekers. And I guess proactive is another P.
Keep it going.
And persistent about going for the positions that you're really interested in and trying to work at a school that you feel really compelled to be a part of their community, but also be patient about the process. It may not take, it may take longer than you expect. It may take years. You may connect with the school now, the timing's not right, and then years down the road, it is right. So, so those are my two P's, patience and persistence.
Fantastic.
And I would probably just say, like I said before, expect change and be adaptable. I don't know if there's a P word that is synonymous for adaptable, but pliable. I don't know.
Well, the STEM teachers love that.
Yeah,
that's right. There's going to be so much change, and schools need to know that you're going to be able to roll with the punches. And I think that's what every employer, school or not, wants to know. And so just be ready and willing to accommodate. The most important things at the end of the day is for that school is the kids and making sure they get the best care they can and best education they can. So anything that you can do to show that and model that would be, I think, a boon to your search. So.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, very good. Well, again, thank you all for participating, for being here, and hopefully you found this to add a little bit of value to your search as you look to join a fantastic school come the fall. So be safe, be healthy, and thank you once again for being part of this. Thank you.
Thank you
Awesome.
all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.